Good afternoon and welcome to this CMI webinar focusing on 5 steps for personal development planning. We'd like to encourage you to submit your questions through the webinar, and there's a form that you can do that lower on the screen. And we can then pick up those questions through the Q&A at the end of the webinar. So first of all, some introductions. My name is Karen Nichols and I am the Service Delivery Manager with the CMI. I have a specific remit to deliver and to support the Chartered Manager Award. And I'd like to hand over to our speaker today, Liz, to introduce herself and to take us forward through the webinar.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liz Hoskin, and my company is Positive Qualities. And we're in for some fun this afternoon talking about personal development planning. So really, the biggest piece for me is, so what is a personal development plan? And it's all about a detailed action plan where you can record your reflections and anything that you want to improve. It's about recognising your strengths, weaknesses, and keeping very close to a set of clear goals to help your development needs, and then keeping track of it, because there's no point having this personal development plan if you're not going to keep track. And keeping track is one of the hardest parts sometimes, because we kind of work gets in the way of things, and that kind of stops us getting to where we want to be. But if we can keep track, then we can progress in the areas that we're being developed. So what is a personal development plan or personal development plan useful for? So if you think about it, we're going into appraisal season at the moment. So if you've got an appraisal coming up, this is the best place to be today. Because if you are preparing for an appraisal, doing your personal development planning is so key, because it helps you reflect on what you've done well. It helps you identify areas maybe where you've done exceptionally well and you can really sell this at your appraisal. It also helps you realise that you might need to improve in some areas. And I always say, before you go for appraisal, be very self-aware. Because if you're self-aware, then you can walk in almost knowing what's about to happen. And then you've got your backup achievements or your backup examples of when you did something really well. It helps you also to figure out your vocational passions. Now, vocational passions are not necessarily about the job you're doing, but sometimes it's about your calling or your purpose. So if you like to be around a lot of people, then that would figure in the type of work you want to do. Or, for example, if you wanted to, you have this desire to travel a lot. So maybe in your career planning, you'd look at jobs that would enable you to travel. And also working towards the role you want. So be aspirational. Don't just stick for the next sort of line up or the next step up. Really be aspirational and think about, what is it I really want to achieve? And sometimes personal development planning can last over a few years. It's not just about the initial appraisal. And if you want to change career, it's a great opportunity to look at, what is it I really like? Because when I changed careers, that was one of my big things, was what I did a pros and cons on my job. And it totally made me go for the right thing for me. It can also help you develop your team. So it's not just about you. So if you're a manager, if you're a supervisor, you can use this to help you develop your team, because by taking stock of where everybody is, taking baselines on performance, you can look at, okay, so what can we do to improve this? And please involve your team in this. Don't do it on your own. And really get to know your team and what drives them, because if you have that, then you can really make a massive difference. It's a great way of recognition for people. Also looking at exemplars. So if I've got a couple of team members who are exceptionally good at a specific thing that I'd like to develop, I will talk to them to find out what behaviours do they have and how can I help other team members achieve them. Highlighting your team achievements, and also succession planning. Now, succession planning has come really to the fore in the last few years. And really, you have to think about, what are the main attributes of your team members? Who looks like they could take a bit more responsibility? Who handles pressure well? Whatever it is. But most of the time, look at the jobs where you know there's going to be movement in the next 6 months. Spotting your skill gaps and problems. So again, within the team, asking the team for feedback. Ask the team for feedback on how you are demonstrating your leadership skills. and also flagging when the team needs some help. Because sometimes help, when you ask for help, people think it's weakness, but it's really one of your biggest strengths. So moving on, we're going to look at the 5 basic steps for a personal development plan. So the first step, looking at the personal development plan cycle, is establish the purpose of the plan. What do you really want to get out of it? What's going to be this outcome? Do you want it to grow? Do you want it to change careers? Whatever it is, take that as your heading. And then this will help you work out how to format it, and also sort of take a bit of a deep dive into what you want to find out and understand how it will benefit you if it's for yourself, but also benefit your team. And also, how are you going to implement what has been learned? Because there's no point in going into this activity if you're not prepared to follow all the way through. So the next stage, stage 2, is carrying out your SWOT analysis. Now, we've had a great big debate about this in the office recently. SWOT analysis, you can do it for yourself, you can do it for your business, but a lot of people seem to skip some of the steps. So SWOT analysis, again, stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you're doing it on yourself, if you were using this, again, go back to appraisals, if you're using this to get a rise or using this to get a change in the department that you're working on, or even just a move up in the career structure, think about what makes you different. What are your strengths on? What qualifications do you have? What kind of projects have you managed? Have you done anything that's made a massive difference to the organisation? And if you keep a note of these as you go along, then this can build and build and build. Your strengths also, it could be that you're great at finding resources, or it could mean that you're very good at getting people on side. So whatever it is, make sure you've got some real live examples that you can share with people. Then once you've done your strengths, have a look at your weaknesses. So what are the areas that you're not so good at? Now, there are different schools of thought on this. Sometimes people, if they've been doing strength finders, they just want to hone in on your strengths and forget your weaknesses. But I would look at some of your weaknesses, maybe 1 or 2 that you feel that would make a personal difference to you. Or if it is in your team, where are your weak areas? If it can't be rectified by the people that are there, that might be a way to help your talent plan, to then look at people who have the areas that are missing in your current team. But weaknesses, don't spend too much time on this unless it's a very specific area. So say you wanted to become the leader of the team. So it might be one of your weaknesses was public speaking. So you would look at, okay, so how am I going to get better at that? I'm going to mention just at the end of this areas that you can look at to help you. So do your strengths, then your weaknesses, then have a look at the opportunities. So is there anything happening in your business, in your company, where you could put your head above the parapet, put your hand up and say, I would like to take part in this. So when I was changing from a store manager to a trainer, I looked at every opportunity I could get to get involved in the training so I could really find out about it. And my hand used to go up all the time. But I tell you, because I had real life experience, when it came to changing over to training, it was so easy. It was such an easy transition. Also look at opportunities, to develop yourself further by even asking for a job shadowing, talking to someone within your team who's very good at something that maybe you haven't been that great at, that you can ask them, can I come and sort of shadow you and just ask some questions to help me? Or you could even look at, how do you want to really approach this? And it might mean that you can go to your boss and have a bit of a plan before you even do your personal development plan and explain that this is what I'm doing, and then ask them to help you. Where are the opportunities for you within the organisation? Then we look at threats, things that could get in the way of or interfere with your development. Now, if you're going to do an extra qualification, or you're going to do maybe extra work at work, you have to think about, is this going to interfere with my lifestyle? Does my family situation, is that going to be able to stand up okay without me if I'm going to have to put a few more hours in? There's all different things that you need to consider. But don't be put off by the threats. Sometimes threats can almost create a bit of an opportunity for you if you take a bit of a delve into it, just to see what could lie beyond the threat. Because sometimes a threat, we were actually doing a SWOT analysis for our business recently, and one of the threats was digitization. But actually, when we took a deep dive into digitisation, we found massive opportunities for ourselves and also an opportunity to partner with people we hadn't thought about before. So it's not necessarily negative. It's really to make you much more self-aware and be prepared for it. Then number 3, we consider our learning style. Now, how do you like to learn? I'm a very visual learner, so when I'm doing anything, I have it right up there. Because if it's not visual, if it's too wordy for me, I actually zone out. So look at your learning style, and if you are doing it for your team, get to know your team's learning styles. Now, on the slide it says, try Honey and Mumford's learning style quiz. So Honey and Mumford is very much about activists, reflectors, pragmatists, and theorists. Now, if you were using Honey and Mumford in your team, you'd look at who are the people who like to put theory into practice, who are the people who like to stand back and reflect a bit. So you can't just rush through things with them. They maybe need time and preparation. So your reflectors and your theorists, sometimes you would need to just give them a bit more time before they do things. And yourself, if you can put yourself on this continuum, you can look at it and decide, where do you sit? And I'm an activist pragmatist. But I do reflect from time to time. But it's about just getting to know that. But there's loads of different tools you can use to get your learning styles. And also, it's worthwhile because the more self-aware you become, the better a manager you'll become, the better person you'll become. You can also use Myers-Briggs. I don't know if anyone's heard about that. So Myers-Briggs, again, you take a questionnaire, then it tells you what type of personality you have. And it gives you a real insight into sometimes what your blockers can be, or sometimes about the relationships that you have within your teams. So all these things are so worthwhile. And if you are a member of CMI at the moment, you can find all of this on Management Direct. And understanding the easiest way for learners to absorb the development means you can choose activities that really work really well for them. Because if you put the effort into the planning and preparation of this part, then you'll pick the best way to develop yourself and your team. And that's what this is all about, because at the end of the day, we really want an absolutely amazing personal development plan that gets us the outcome we want, but also if it's for our team, it's going to help the team, but at the end result, it's going to help the business. So when you're doing your action planning, look into this with a lot of detail, take time, do a little bit and then move away from it, because sometimes it's hard to work out how you're going to do all this. And a lot of people would use SMART. So SMART's an acronym, and SMART stands for specific. So what are your expectations for this? What are the specific things you want to work on? Measured. How will you know, what does success look like? How will you know when you do succeed? So if you took something like professional speaking, public speaking, or standing up in front of people, how will you know you've succeeded when you don't get this feeling of being sick constantly when you think about it? Because public speaking is ranked second to death. So we need to look at that. The A in SMART stands for, is it going to be achievable? Is this realistic? Now, I'm from a very positive school of thought that a lot of the times when they say it's achievable, then to me, it's not stretching me enough, but that's my own personal preference. But sometimes it's nice to sort of reach beyond where you're aiming for, so you'll at least reach your first destination. So there's nothing wrong in this part by looking at it and saying, right, okay, I really want to be the team leader by the end of the year. But at the moment, I'm going to get better at relationship building. And that's my first goal. But the big goal is really to be team leader. So you can do your personal development planning in stages. So you've got milestones or just little achievements that you can sort of keep a note of so you know you're making progress. Make sure it's relevant. So make sure it aligns with your department, your team, your company, your own personal vision. So as we look forward to the future, our jobs are all going to change dramatically. And the biggest thing about this is we need to be ready to move quickly, because jobs aren't going to last for 15, 20, 35 years. We're all moving into a completely new world, which is, for me, very exciting, because my biggest thing is change management. However, you need to think about this when you're doing this, because the alignment with the big picture goals could be that you have a career plan that you're looking 5 years ahead. It could be that you're just looking for this year because at the end of this year, you'll take stock and decide what you're going to do next. It's all very flexible. And make sure they're timed. When does it need to be done by? Always talking about just being accountable and responsible for what you're doing. But the biggest thing about this is you need to go into action. A plan is just a plan on paper. What makes it work is the action. And that's the piece that people really struggle with, especially procrastinators who put things off. And sometimes if you just put it into little bite-sized steps, you can really get into this and find it really exciting, because you can find out so much about yourself throughout this whole process. So our fifth step, and the last step on the personal development planning cycle. Now, this is a bit that really, really resonates deeply with me, because when you're doing anything new, anything to improve, develop, you need to make sure that it does work. And we talk about collating evidence that it has worked, talking to people, filling in questionnaires, all sorts of things. But when you're doing your own personal development plan, you need to be honest with yourself and evaluate, wait a minute, what should I keep doing? What should I stop doing? What isn't working for me? Is there a part even of my personality that I need to look at? Or is there something that I bring into work all the time that's stopping me getting to where I need to be? So there needs to be time for honest reflection. Because if you don't do that, then you're kidding yourself. And sometimes it's good to have space to do this. So do your plan, go away and then start looking at it before you put it into action. And then once you put it into action, step back from it and say, right, okay, so did I hit my goal? Did it give me everything I expected it to give me? Or is there something missing? How well did the activity sink in if I was working for my team? How worthwhile was it? How useful was it? Is there something new that I need to keep doing now? Because if you sit and you take time to reflect, reflection is one of the most difficult things to get time to do in our busy days. And with all this social media and mobile technology, you see people now rushing to their phone to check things all the time. So your reflective piece should always come in your action plan. Put some time to self-reflect on this. And you have to really, really put time into it. And sometimes when you're doing this, you will identify other areas to be developed, and that's not a bad thing. It's not that your plan has failed. It's not that you've got to the end of this and it's not worth it. Everything's worth it if you've identified things you still need to do, because it should be almost like a living, breathing document that you can add to. And also, what could have done better or gone better? Could I have put a bit more effort in? Did I prepare enough? Did I take this seriously enough? Because sometimes people rush through it because they're so concerned that they want to beat the next person. If you're very competitive, I work with people doing coaching, and sometimes it's almost like as fast as I can get this done. But sometimes fast isn't the way to approach this. Sometimes it is being a bit realistic and giving yourself the right amount of time. Because if you don't give yourself the time, how are you going to get it done? You can also look at other things that you can do. So when you evaluate how effective this plan has been, you can look at, okay, so is there maybe some training courses I need to do? Could I maybe ask for a secondment, a job rotation? You know, if I got involved more in some project work, maybe I should put that down. So when I go to my appraisal next time, I'll ask for this. Or if you've got the type of boss who has quite active, interactive meetings, then maybe it's something you get added to the agenda. So you don't have to wait for another 6 months or another year. But also, do I need a coach? Do I need a mentor? I have 2 mentors and I have a coach, but they're all for totally different things. I have a mentor who is growing me as a person, but I've got a mentor for my business. And my coach looks at me as a person. So how am I performing? What do I need to work on? Have I remembered to do the things I said I was? And they hold me accountable for what I'm doing. So sometimes when you're doing a personal development plan, get an accountability buddy, because that really helps. And we sometimes form triads. We have mastermind groups. So a mastermind group is people all going sort of want to sort of get the same outcomes, but they might be in different industries. But we meet usually on Zoom or a Google Hangout, and we meet and we chat about where we are. And someone will always have an answer or a piece of knowledge. So it's a lot about knowledge transfer, but also accountability, but also a bit of inspiration. Because, you're only going to be as good as the people you hang around with. So if the people you're hanging around with are not helping you, so you maybe need to start looking at decluttering your friends, decluttering some of the people who you used to maybe go to for advice and help. But as we grow and we develop, so do the people we need to hang around with. They need to change sometimes. And there's nothing wrong in having a good declutter. And that goes for everything, whether it goes for all the stuff that you keep on your research or whether it goes for real live human beings. When you look at the whole review too, I have this little thing that we do. We have a thing called an action review. Now, please take this. Everything here is for take it. An action review takes probably 5 minutes. We do it once a week. And literally, action review is we take a piece of paper, we put a plus sign on the left-hand side, and we put a minus sign on the right-hand side. And literally, as a team, we just go through, and the plus sign is, okay, so what went well this week? What were the real good things that we did? What was the recognition we got for this? What were the results? And then on the right-hand side, what didn't go so well? Kind of like a lessons learned, but in 5 minutes. And we keep these, and we use them as a tracker to see our journey, to see how much we've managed to achieve. And these little trackers become part of our story. And you can do it for yourself, you can do it for your team, you can do it for the whole company. But an action review, it's on your feet, it's done very quickly, but it really captures some of the essence of some of the things that you've done. Going back to the reflection, for us, reflection is really important because when we reflect, we look back at, is this something I let happen? Is this something I helped happen? Or is this something that I'm making happen? Am I really making a difference? And that's a big piece of the self-reflection for us. And sometimes you don't appreciate how much you've achieved. And that's something else that makes it really exciting, because once you see how far you've come, you can never go back the way, because you don't look backwards, you go forwards. And that's the piece for me that makes it all worthwhile. Then it takes us to something that I absolutely love. So my company, we also provide qualifications. So recording CPD, so continuing professional development, it's something that's so important, because when you're feeling a bit lost sometimes, and we all have these days when we go up or we go down, but on the down days, sometimes having a little dive into your CPD makes you realise why you're doing this. Lets you see how far you've come. And you can record it all different ways. If you're a member of CMI, you go onto Management Direct and you can just record it. So anytime you're doing anything, so reading, looking at videos, you can add it to your learning journey, and then you can add it straight into your CPD record. I make an effort every month to sit down and put in my CPD. And I do a reflection. At the end of the year, I look at how much I've done and look at where I've had the most return from my investment. And my investment's normally my time, because I'm quite a small business. However, time is so important. So if I invest my time, I want to make sure I've had a return for it. And also, CPD makes you better equipped and prepared. And there's a lower chance of you making mistakes the next time, because sometimes when you get your lessons learned or you've done your reflection and your review, by writing it up in your CPD, what happens is you won't make that mistake again. It stops you from doing the same old thing. If you're doing it for your team, it can help your team's performance, because you can go and do something and then come back and share it with your team. But also it can make you realise what you've learned, and it helps open new doors for you in your career. CPD is so important, because as soon as you go on to do any sort of awarding body membership, so if you're part of CMI, you're part of the Association of Project Managers, you're part of the Chartered Chartered Management Accountants, anything like that, if you're part of any of these chartered bodies, you want to make sure that you're keeping your CPD, because that's part of being chartered. Being able to spot and open doors, a structured approach to take control of your career and your team's performance. So you can look at, okay, over the next month, I'm going to do this. And then you've got a complete record of it. And then you can take that record into your personal development plan. It's also a way to see and show your team how far they've come, and also how much you've added value to your employers. We run a lot of qualifications, so we need to keep job current. We need to have a lot of information about that. If we're delivering customer service qualifications, or we're delivering management qualifications, are we proving that we're doing this? I'm also a chartered manager. And I mean, for me, that's a huge thing, but we'll talk about that in a little minute. Also, when you're doing your personal development planning, these are the skills that people kind of tend to forget, or they find them hard to develop. So some of these belong to the emotional intelligence, and part of what we do is big on emotional intelligence, because emotional intelligence is probably quite hard sometimes to gauge or even track as a measurement. But the biggest piece is you'll know you've done it well because you feel the difference and you see the difference. So things like adaptability. So if you reflect back to just a couple of minutes ago, I was talking about the way our career paths are about to change. And this being adaptable and receptive to change. Let's face it, we are absolutely going to be change all the time. And if you can be adaptable and don't get that kind of horrible feel every time someone says we're about to change this, and you take being adaptable as an opportunity rather than a threat, it's amazing how you will take this on board and really look forward to it. Ethical practice. Now, for me, ethical practice, it's a feeling as well. You know, when you're doing something and you know it's right, you feel it. But if it's not right, again, pay attention to how you're feeling, because that will tell you something isn't quite right. Or if someone asks you to do something, is this the right thing to do? Is this ethical? And you need to look at all the, especially now in the world that we're living in, people are becoming much more aware when it comes to mental health and well-being, when it comes to equal opportunity, sex discrimination, everything. Ethical practice is coming up much more and more. So be really aware of that and look at how you deliver that. How do you cope with that? What do you do that's different? Because if you're going to be looking for your next career, that's something that's going to come up. Self-control or self-regulation. I always talk about, be very aware of your trigger points, the things that annoy you, the things that make you who you are, which is part of your DNA. However, be aware of it and then use it to your advantage. Don't use it to your disadvantage. If you have a degree of impatience, then turn it into anticipation. Don't sit in impatience, because if you sit being impatient, all your team are going to get fed up with you. So you need to be a way to harness the way you feel, your emotions, the way you deal with people. Empathy is another one. Empathy for me is exactly that, understanding others' feelings. Put yourself in their shoes. Put yourself in their shoes and think about, okay, so if that was that person, how do they want to be treated? What can you do that would help them? And also, if you're dealing with someone and you don't have authority for them, so say you have a team and you're working towards someone, but there's another team and there's someone in that team has a piece of knowledge, or they're the gateway to something that you need. So there's a little tool that you can use. So it's a model from Cohen and Bradford. And Cohen and Bradford talk about understanding people's value. So if you understand what that person values, and we call it currency, then look at that. Look at what they value and go to them with what they value first. And that totally changes the whole situation. And they're more, well, what could you say? They're more amenable to helping you. It's called reciprocity. It's doing something really without the expectation it's going to work. But by doing something for someone first actually helps all of this. And empathy helps you in every walk of life. It's not just about business and your career. Then we talk about resilience. And ability to bounce back sounds great. Learn from failure sounds great. But Resilience for me is about planning for it, putting plans in place. So if you get a major life change and you know it's happening, sit down and take some time to plan. It's like, in your personal development plan, you maybe start out with a massive outcome that you want to achieve. However, once you get into it, something happens. Be ready. As soon as you find that out, change your plan. Don't sit and bash it to death. Literally change your plan. Plan for it. Because by planning for it, you're almost be able to keep the stress levels down as things start to happen or things start to unravel. And I'm a great believer in remaining calm, even though it's going to be chaotic. Keep calm because you've prepared for it. Sometimes we call it a pre-mortem. Now, it's not about bodies and I'm not medical at all. However, a pre-mortem is looking at all the things that can go wrong and planning for them. Because if you plan and at least discuss it with your team or discuss it with your family, you're ready to plan and really take this through. And you'll learn very quickly that it's not as bad as you thought it was going to be, because most of the time it's facing fear. And once you walk into fear, things become much different and usually pretty easy or easier. Last one is self-awareness, understanding how you impact others. I have got loads of energy and I need to rein that in when I'm dealing with people sometimes because it's too much for people. I just need to look at the body language. But again, I watch how people react to me and I call it flexing. I would flex how I am with certain people because I don't want to put them off me. But most of the time, if they have been put off to start with, we usually end up being lifelong friends because of my self-awareness and their self-awareness. And also, I love challenging conversations too. I don't sort of slide away from any of that. I love to actually sit down and let's just get it out on the table and let's discuss it. So by being more self-aware, what happens is you can only be a better version of yourself. And if personal development planning gets you to that stage, that's fantastic. That is so good. And again, we measure success. Now, before we do any type of personal development planning, we would look at some metrics first. We'd look at a bit of a baseline because I want to know what success looks like. So I want to see if we've got movement. So we were doing a piece on a business and it was all about emotional intelligence. There was 4 things the business consistently did wrong. And I'm going to say wrong just for sheer strength here. And no one could work it out. And it was all to do with emotional intelligence. So literally, we took the baseline of how they'd all scored. And we looked at how we would demonstrate the change. And the change was people had to start living the values. So the behaviours were the big piece. So by taking the behaviours, looking at emotional intelligence, all of a sudden it flipped it. And within 3 months, they scored 15% greater in their emotional intelligence scores. Now, to me, that's success. That shows you. We knew we would get movement positive direction-wise, but we didn't know how much we would get. We reckoned between 5 and 10, but 15 showed that everyone took this on board. And, the company were amazing because everybody really worked hard at it and they were all totally committed in it. And that's what this is about. Take feedback, survey your stakeholders, your customers, survey your team, ask your team. How did they feel about this? How did it go for them? Has this helped? Has this made things easier? Because sometimes people get stuck in a rut with this and think, why are we changing things? It's not broken. But sometimes it doesn't matter. Sometimes it's nice just to have a look at, is there any other ways we can do it? Constantly innovate, because that's the whole landscape at the moment is innovation. Also look at qualifications, formal recognition of skills and knowledge. So it might be you work towards looking at, I'm going to go for a qualification, or I'm going to have a look at something that could really prove that my management has become so much better. And this is all about chartered management. Being a chartered manager, it gives extra weight to all the evidence types above, plus allowing you to say your skills are approved by CMI, which is the UK's leading authority on management and leadership. It is, it is the ultimate professional hallmark. I'm a chartered manager, and it was one of the best things I've ever done, because I'm a great person in working in all the companies that I work in. However, it takes time out of your business to reflect. But the biggest piece for me was it made me much more self-aware. And self-awareness to me is the key to most things. And if you do want to demonstrate how far you've come, or also, I am a good manager, you can really use a Chartered Manager Award to help you prove that. So I'm going to hand over to Karen, who's going to take you through everything about Chartered Manager.
Thank you, Liz. Sorry about that. So in terms of Chartered Manager, I'd just like to expand a little about how and where Chartered Manager has a natural fit with personal development planning. So as the CMI's flagship professional award, there's a real resonance between personal development planning that Liz has outlined and Chartered Manager. So firstly, I'd say in terms of overarching purpose, so both personal development planning and Chartered Manager focus on tracking and recording achievements. There's an absolute focus also on self-reflection and evaluation, and how an understanding of your strengths and your weaknesses, so the SWOT piece that Liz was talking about, how that can and should feed into your future development goals. I think secondly, I'd say in what we look for a Charter Manager candidate to describe, to evidence and to measure, those professional skills and effective and ethical management practice are also key. And something jumped out to me when we were exploring what we'd cover in the webinar here around where Chartered Manager fits within the cycle. So Chartered Manager could absolutely be a destination point. It could be what you decide to develop, having gone through the personal development planning cycle. So that next development step for you, and when you follow Liz's steps, you'd be capturing detail that could actually support your application to become chartered. But I'd also say it can be an integral part of that personal development planning cycle. So in what you're looking for Chartered Manager, in what you're demonstrating, exploring your achievements, thinking about how you've applied your skills and with what effect, you're also being prompted to think about and to reflect on what works. So it absolutely feeds into that final step that Liz was talking about in terms of reflect, refine, repeat. So if you think about Chartered Manager for yourself or for your team, if you or your team are experienced managers, then there'll be a route to award for each of you to progress straight away. If you or your team are in the early stages of your management career, then it can be something to aspire to develop further in your career. And there's absolutely an opportunity for both angles there. I'd say that putting Chartered Manager at the core of your personal development planning goals, they're going to help you to develop some of those skills, the more challenging skills, the behaviours, the positive habits that were previously mentioned. I think it would show a commitment to continual improvement and aiming for that really high standard, but also setting a clear path for development because you know what it is you're working towards. And once you are chartered, it can sum up for employers, for your customers, suppliers, stakeholders, demonstrating the characteristics that you have, that you add value. So you're contributing to your organization's success. You're delivering tangible benefits for the business, that you're delivering results. And as a result of your management approach, but also in how you motivate your team, perhaps in how you help to develop your team so that collectively you can continue to deliver results. It can demonstrate that you work more confidently, which is something that Liz absolutely identified about self-confidence, self-evaluation, self-awareness. So that confidence that in applying your skills and knowing how to achieve results, you can also increase your self-awareness. And underpinning all of that, there's the values around the ethical practice. So showing your professional integrity and your commitment to ethical behaviour. And because you've been through the assessment for Chartered Manager, you've had all of those skills impartially assessed and approved. Everyone who becomes chartered is doing it for a different reason. So it's always a very personal reason for what's driving that. And the slide that you can see here shows some of the most common drivers. So 96% there showing, using it as a showcase for their ongoing development, that people want to be seen or want to be able to identify that they're better managers. Again, that piece around confidence, self-confidence in skills and expertise, that people can see they go on to exceed targets as a result, or that it's helped them improve what they do or how they do it, or equally, how they feed that into their team to be able to show improvement on an operational perspective. And I'd add to that that the feedback from people post-award, people who come back to us to tell us what they thought about it, it mirrors that view and it supports the key messages around personal development. So if I were to just give you some examples, one chartered manager said, it made me review my work in detail, think about what I do, the contribution it makes to the workplace and to the people that I manage. Another person fed back that the whole process was a valuable exercise in self-reflection, self-evaluation of performance. I guess when you're thinking about the assessment for Chartered Manager, another candidate said, my assessor helped me to reflect on my strengths and weaknesses, how I could do things differently in the future, and the next steps for my professional development. And then one simple comment, which I think is actually very useful in light of personal development planning, was, what a wonderful, informative and challenging experience. Now my ongoing learning can begin. And I think that really comes back to that idea of having a cycle of development, of going through those steps, of having that awareness, of really reviewing what works and resetting those goals, resetting those expectations and activities. It absolutely underlines the value of the cycle of development and the power of reflection. So analysing success, isolating the decision tracks that led to that success and the approaches and the behaviours that you use, what you want to replicate and what opportunities are there for you to be able to develop in the future. There are a number of case studies. We've got a quote you can see here on screen from a lady called Rebecca Frayne, who is a chartered fellow with CMI. And on the website, there's a number of other case studies. If you want to see other people's experience of going through the award, you'll be able to find them all on the main website page. So now we're moving into the portion of the webinar, really, that's an opportunity to kind of look at some of the questions and answers that have come through. Thank you very much to everybody who either posted questions ahead of the webinar or who've added into those questions now. So what I'd like to do is just ask Liz perhaps a couple of the questions. Let me create some of the questions that have come up here. So Liz, there's a question here that asks, how do you deal with an agile organization when targets and objectives can change? Apologies, everyone. I think we have some technical issues at the moment on the sound. Just bear with us while we look to rectify that situation. whilst we're just trying to sort that out, let me just take you through. So there's a couple of questions that came through from people saying, you know, is it possible to have a copy of the slides? Absolutely. So what we will be looking to do post-webinar is get an email out to everybody. We will provide you with a link through to the recording. And for any of you who perhaps joined or missed anything at the start, you'll have the opportunity to be able to hear the entire recording. And also that we'll look to collate all of the questions that have come through to us, and obviously provide some answers, and we'll provide you all again with that list of questions and answers, and that will all be done on completion of the webinar. Let me just look and see if there's any other questions here which I can potentially provide an answer to. So there's a question here, what was the difference between a personal development plan and a CPD record? Well, I guess from what Liz was identifying, in actual fact, the two are pretty much interlinked. So the personal development plan about identifying your objectives, about looking at what your activities could be or need to be, and being able to complete those and review them is absolutely part of that personal development planning cycle. So I think the two intrinsically linked as far as that is concerned. There was a question there, I think, also about how can I become CMI accredited? So I think this potentially links back to Chartered Manager specifically. So in terms of the opportunity to become chartered, well, if you're a member of CMI, in fact, if you're not a member, you can absolutely join CMI, become a member, and have the opportunity from that to be able to go through the Chartered Manager Award to get that individual recognition. And there are different routes to award, and there is a route for everybody based on your experience and your qualifications. Through that process, what we will be doing would be prompting you to explore and to think about what you've achieved, what you've delivered within your business. We talk about the last 18 months, so we have a focus on recent achievement. But also within that, we ask you to think about how you apply your skills in order to realize those achievements, those results, those outcomes. We do want you to be specific where you can, so we're looking for you to be able to measure that success, measure the outcomes that you delivered, but thinking about how you use your skills to bring that about. So it's not just what you did, it's how you did it, and it's how you worked with other people, perhaps how you influenced other people, how you were leading people, how you were managing change. There's an element there around reflection.
But were you all able to hear me okay?
Hello, Liz, can you hear me? Sorry, coming back to Chartered Manager assessment. So yes, we'll focus then on exploring your achievements and how they have delivered. The assessor will work with you on that. They want to understand the value of what you've delivered for your business and really explore and get down to that detail, understand what your role was. So through that, in the opportunity to achieve the Chartered Manager Award, then you've really got the opportunity, I suppose, again, coming back to feeding into this personal development planning cycle and how that review, that reflection, what you've learned about yourself going through the process can feed into what you then decide to do next. What are the areas for your potential development, understanding where your strengths are, and so on. So I'm just going to check and see if we have Liz available. Liz, are you back with us?
Hello, can you hear me now?
Hello, Liz, can you hear us? Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, Liz, so what I was saying was, what I'll do is just curate some of the questions, perhaps if you can provide us with some responses. So one of the questions was, how do you deal with an agile organization when targets and objectives can change in relation to your personal development planning?
So again, communicate a lot. But when you're doing your personal development plan, you have your goal there. But remember what I said, prepare for how it might change. Because if you put some prep in, it's amazing how you can take the change on quite quickly and also incorporate that into your plan. But also make sure that you keep up to date with all the meetings, because sometimes when you're in an agile organization, you might miss a piece of the communication. There should be visual boards about, so make sure that you're up to date with everything. Does that answer that okay?
Yeah, I think so. And there's another question here, useful one from Livy. So my team see PDP planning as dependent on the company's training budget, and how can I change that mindset?
Oh, good, easily. Easily, because if you go back to one of the slides when we said, like, vacation, when you think about people's vacation, you can do an awful lot of stuff without it costing you any money. So to develop people, go back to thinking about the shadowing, the secondments, maybe even doing some voluntary work if that's something that helps really feed someone's passion. You could also get them more involved in networking, because even at networking, you'll learn things. You can set up knowledge transfer groups within the company where you hold little hangouts and you can share knowledge between each other. It's not all about training and bringing new things in. Sometimes you can have access to quite a lot of good resources. You can get involved in podcasts, TED Talks. There's so much out there that you don't need to have any budget for. So, I mean, if they want more information, they could. I'm happy for my email address to go out to them and I can give them some more pointers. But there's so much free resource out there that can totally make up your plan much easier without the money side. And sometimes because they've been involved in researching to find it, it makes them much more committed to achieving it.
Excellent. There's an interesting question here. How do you write a PDP you'll stick to?
So therein goes a belief then. I would say, because the words you've used would tell me that you have a bit of an issue sticking to things. So if you use your SMART objectives, that will help. However, get an accountability buddy. That's the best way, because accountability buddies, so I help people when they do their PhDs, and I am an accountability buddy by email. And I will email them once a week or once a month, depending on what we agree, to find out what they've done this, how many words have they written, what have they done, and they report back to me. And I tell you, they'll miss it once, but they won't miss it a second time. Because having to say to someone that you're letting yourself down, they feel they're letting me down, but they're not. I'm just making sure that they achieve it. And by having an accountability buddy, you're much more likely to achieve than you are to miss your achievement. So that's what I would say for that one.
Fantastic. There's a question here as well from Sarah, who says, how will I know if I'm doing it right?
Again, so find someone who has already maybe done a personal development plan and achieved their objectives. So use LinkedIn sometimes. So LinkedIn is good to find peer-to-peer support and help. So you can put a question up on LinkedIn and just sort of say, look, I'm looking for advice on personal development planning, and you will get loads of people wanting to help you. You can go and join forums. So so the professional bodies will have forums, but look even for networking events where they're talking about personal development planning, because it's a pretty hot topic. It never ever goes away, because even when you're working for yourself, you should still do a personal development plan. So I would really look at joining a forum, ask some questions, reach out to someone in your network. And if you don't want to reach out to someone within the company, find someone outside the company who's on your LinkedIn network and reach out to them, and they'll help you. It's amazing. I had a reach out from Chicago last week, and I haven't spoken to this woman for ages, and she got in touch. And literally, we had a fantastic chat about personal development planning and things that she'd been doing, how she was going to use them. And sometimes you just need to check in with someone so you know that you're not mad or you're not going down a wrong route, or a route that maybe isn't going to take you to the right result. So sometimes it's just a sanity check you need, because we sometimes overthink things. So no, I would have a look at that. Reach out to someone.
Thank you, Liz. So just a few more questions that have come in. I'm conscious of the time we have here. So a question here, actually interesting. What's the distinction between a mentor and a coach?
Right, so coach will coach you through a very specific thing. They will not give you any advice. They will not point you towards specific resources or anything like that. They will ask you questions to get you to discover what you need to do to change. And they will, you know, they will challenge you to really think about this. Because really, unless you do it for you, unless you come up with the answers, you aren't going to change, because we can't make you change. So you need to, you know, sit one-on-one with someone and they will take you through that. A mentor is completely different. A mentor will bring on, so a mentor might come in and they've got great experience in growing a business. So they're going to help you through the kind of pitfalls, avoiding mistakes because they've already got that expertise. Or they will come in and give you advice and say, well, wait a minute, don't do it this way, do it that way. Now, you don't have to follow the mentor. But what it does is it opens your mind up to lots of possibilities and opportunities. So coaching you specifically on a skill you want to achieve. Most of the time when I'm coaching, it's about a behaviour change someone wants to make. Now, if I tell them how they're supposed to behave, I'm not coaching them. I'm doing mentoring, and I'm also telling. And coaching isn't about telling. Coaching's about asking a series of questions to get you to work it out for yourself. And that's how coaching can be very, very powerful. And behaviour change, once you master it, you feel as though you've climbed a mountain, because behaviour can be quite hard to change. So if you had a mentor telling you how to change your behaviour, you might not take it on board very well. Does that make sense okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I think perhaps we've time for one more question, but it's one I think I'll field. So there's a question here: how can Chartered Manager help us in career growth? Well, actually, Liz, I might come back to you in a minute. Let me just initially give some thoughts, but I'd be interested to understand what your thoughts are as a Chartered Manager as well. I mean, what I would suggest, and certainly the feedback that we will have had from candidates going through this, it again links to PDP. It's all about that reflection. It's about being able to identify what it is that you've delivered. Because if your career, if really where you want to go and how you want to grow in your career is about being able to prove that you have the skills, that you apply them, and that you can see the end results, and that's absolutely what Chartered Manager is looking to do, albeit it's looking at a particular point in time. It's looking at recent achievement, but it's also looking to encourage you to start those good habits around reflection, around evaluating, taking the time to stop and think, what is it that I've actually achieved? Why was that important for the business? And what is it actually delivered? I think very often as managers, we don't tend to take the time to really do that evaluation piece, to reflect on success, might even be reflecting on the things that didn't work, but to be able to say, I can grow from this, I can take something from it, I can identify those behaviors, the approaches, the management skills, the things I should do that I should replicate because they're going to help me get further. They might be giving me the next opportunity, but also to learn from the things that don't work quite so well. Because in that self-awareness and in building confidence in that way, you absolutely are then able to push out the message about, you know, why you're such an effective manager and why you're somebody that every organisation, every employer should want to employ, should want to take forward. So that would be my take on that. But Liz, what are your thoughts about Chartered Manager and career growth?
Chartered Manager for me was, the biggest thing that came back from it was the impact. So what was my impact on my business, on my team, how my company could grow differently? Because once you understand the impact you're having, you'll put more energy and commitment into that. But also when you're talking to other people, you've got proof that you've had that impact. And as I don't care what anyone says, these days, if you can prove that you have reached the standard of Chartered Manager, to me then that's saying that I am a really good manager. I do all the things that are set out to be done. But the biggest piece for me is I keep developing. And my CPD, I love the fact that it really encouraged me to keep my CPD up to date, current, relevant. And being the Chartered Manager, it's lovely to talk with other Chartered Managers and realise the impact that we're all making. And if we could get the critical mass to really push this out right across, because for me, I used to work with loads, when I was in corporate world, I worked with loads of accidental managers who got the job because they were good at something, but they weren't a good manager because no one had ever trained them to be a good manager. No one coached them, no one had developed them. And being a Chartered Manager, then I feel I can really share that with up-and-coming managers or managers who sometimes have never had the recognition. And once they learn a bit about it, it kind of gets them excited to try and go for something like that. That for me, it's a complete no-brainer. It was so worthwhile. And I loved the assessor, was fantastic, really helped me see things clearly and succinctly and left me to do things and come back with more things. And I really absolutely loved the process. It's not a hard process, but it does make you reflect and become much more self-aware. So yeah, loved it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Liz. So really, I guess we're drawing to a close really now on the webinar, but Liz, I'd want to say thank you very much, first of all, to you for sharing your insight and experience. Thank you to everybody who's joined us today. If you'd like to move forward with Chartered Manager, then, and if you've got questions, then you can contact the team here at CMI. Our telephone number is 01536 207429. But as I said earlier, we will be following up to everybody with an email. We'll make sure that the webinar recording and that the full list of questions and answers are provided through to you all. So thank you very much for your time.